So yesterday we started discussing about the intricacies of last one chapter in the ethics syllabus, that is work culture, so probity and governance, and all the related topics of the same. Right? So the point I was trying to make yesterday is, so all those are not individual topics, all of them are interlinked, and corruption is one common thing among all of those, right? And how the topics from part A, the syllabus part A, are converted into case studies in part B. So that is the crux of yesterday's class, and I'm sure all of you must have understood it very nicely, because it's simple and straightforward enough. And I want to tell you one more thing. If you take any standard textbook, or for example the one we are preferring, the DK Balaji book, okay, you have a very basic understanding on the topic, right? And one more thing that is missing in most of the books is value addition part, and lastly interlinking to current affairs. See, please understand this concept very nicely. Basic means, say, what is work culture, what is social audit. This part is given in almost all the textbooks, okay? 1, 2, 3 or whatever lines are mentioned, it is mentioned. Now there is no defined boundary that UPSC has to play within this line only, right? Yashashwini, can you please mute? Yes, okay. Right. For example, there was a question about constitutional morality. You directly don't find that particular term in the ethics paper, right? And in some case studies, they have asked, frame a policy for migrant laborers, frame a policy for rural laborers. So these are actually GS2 terminologies which are applicable in GS4. So it's not like hard and fast rule. UPSC will stay within this particular framework, and you read the basics and you are done. So it's always wise, even if you take the line corruption. Okay, so UPSC might ask you about whistleblowers bill. Because the application of whistleblowers concept is one more thing, but what exactly is in whistleblowers bill and how will you use it in case studies or answer writing is one more thing. So that is value addition. For example, social audit, all of you can read DK Balaji. I think 1 or 2 pages he has mentioned social audit, right? I don't think he has mentioned social audit, but yeah. So for example, work culture in DK Balaji or utilization of public funds, all these things are there. Now, what is value addition? You need to have a case study. How social audit helped reduce corruption in Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka, right? So if you know that as a value addition, that will definitely increase your chances to write even better answer than your peers. And lastly, the current affairs part. Every day, each and every day, if you see the value addition part, then it is fine. Now let's take IPL. When IPL was, when cases are increasing on the one hand side, IPL was, people demanded IPL to be blocked. And New Indian Express even took a stand that we are not going to cover the IPL matches, right? So on the one hand, people are dying because of COVID and all those things. On the other hand, do we need the IPL to continue? Now that it is banned, that is one more thing. But the thing is it a moral dilemma for the society? Sports cheer people, sports divert the people away from the problems and make them feel better, right? And it is not something new. From Roman times, the gladiators, all the way till the new IPLs, everything is an entertainment opium for the masses, right? So what's wrong in getting the deviation? If there were no COVID cases, should IPL should IPL be banned during present times? Entry for public, there are, though there are no public, right? This year IPL public was totally zero, nil, zero audience, empty stadiums. So they even have a bubble, right? COVID bubble. Yesterday, I think Surendra has drawn a very good. It is an industry, after all, trying to keep afloat in whatever way, trying to harm anyone directly. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when people are dying because of the COVID pandemic and all those things, celebrities are going to Maldives. So that is also one moral issue that has been raised by the society. The sheer display of money. So this is also their individual choice, right? They have money, they have the privilege, they have the luxury to go, they are going. So this is the other side of the coin. So why should this be linked to that? Should we put a moral burden on them? So these are all the silent questions, or the subtle questions that we see in the papers, or we see in the news. I will tell you things we don't actually see. So for example, Supreme Court is, or high courts are coming heavily on the government. Implement oxygen, make sure oxygen is available by 3rd May or 4th May or whatever, right? So, or 10th May, why are you not doing this, why are you not doing that? So when I say government, don't you think that Supreme Court is putting pressure on the bureaucrats? At the end of the day, it will all fall on their heads, right? So the PM will call a meeting of chief secretaries and he will say, by 10th May, I need oxygen cylinders up and running. So there is an excessive pressure on the bureaucrats, right? So such a heavy stress environment, even they are human beings. There is a campaign run by Andhra Pradesh police yesterday or recently. Like the police people will be carrying placards. Like, my wife is waiting for me in my home. My mother is worried about me. Okay, so at the end of the day, when we push all these people into the roads, okay, their families are also emotionally suffering, and nobody in the planet is actually counting the emotional trauma of all these people, right? For example, when we say 3,000 people are dying every day, we have converted into a metric. 3,000 people are dying every day. Okay, or 4 lakh people are infected. So that's a metric. But again, the same time, 3,000 families, their relatives, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, all these people are emotionally affected by them, right? So mental health is a huge issue. Right? So, as a potential bureaucrat, are you having that virtue or that thought process where you sympathize and also have the compassion to look far ahead and work on this also? At least that thread of thought, that line of thought, if it runs in your brain even for 5 seconds, your answer writing will be enhanced automatically. Because in the exam hall, you don't have to sit and think what other dimension should I think, right? Automatically everybody is impacted. I can say without any doubt that almost literally each and every one of you have been affected by COVID in one way or the other, right? There are no two ways about it. If you are really untouched by COVID, then we are the creamiest of the cream. Like you are somewhere else from the rest of us. But everybody is somehow affected, either directly or their loved ones or their family members or friends. Somehow the things are connected, right? So when all such things are happening, so as a bureaucrat there is an excessive pressure. Probably your own family members are affected. You have a duty to the society, so there is a conflict of interest. Should I take care of my family or should I take care of the larger society? Is it what my job actually demands, right? So these lines of thought should come on a daily basis. When you read ethics on a daily basis without realizing that you are preparing for ethics, your life will get very very easy in the end. Okay. Yesterday also there is an article like what happens when you underreport the COVID cases. Okay. So that is one form of moral corruption, right? So you are ordered as a bureaucrat, you are ordered to do something else by the political masters. That is fine. You are following rules and regulations. But at the end of the day, it is one form of moral corruption that led to more problems than it solved, right? And hypothetically, if there is a virus mutation, like let's say fourth or fifth generation virus mutation, which is beyond and above the present vaccines, like the present vaccines won't work on the fifth generation of the COVID virus, who is to blame, right? So and again one more question. I'm just giving you examples from last few days. When all these things are happening, the most important news that was running in the media is Melinda and Bill Gates are getting divorced. What will happen to the 147 billion, as if $1 is going to be given to this particular person, right? So it's their personal life. So where do we draw the lines? So these kind of ethical moral questions have to be asked as frequently as possible. So if a country can discuss all these things, right, then automatically things will get better. Now, where do you put IPL? IPL is sports or entertainment? Don't say entertainment through sports. Okay. Let's say if Virat Kohli is wearing a blue jersey for the country India, can we call it as sports or entertainment? Oh, sorry. When you play for the country, it's sports, right? Cricket has evolved itself from being a sports to entertainment. Okay, sport to entertainment. Okay. So not even when you play for the country, it's considered as sport. Okay. BCCI is a private body. Hmm. Okay. But still, the essence is to represent your country, right? Like Sports Authority of India. Okay. So your objection is more about which organization is running rather than the nature of the sport itself. Cricket is a sport. Gully cricket to World Cup. Okay. Mm-hmm. So where do you place IPL? IPL is also sport. It is a sport no matter what, if played fairly, then the game, then play the game, do not merely act. Okay, because of the organization, the nature has changed. Okay, so Hare Krishna is talking about the organization. So Hare Krishna, all I have to do is to bring BCCI under government control, then it will become sport. So don't you think there is a flaw somewhere in that argument? Maybe nature of why it is played or how it is played makes all the difference. Again, I'm just asking you, I'm not giving you like this is the answer, but I am trying to bring some thought process into your daily mindset, like what you see. Yes. So personally, I believe, like my personal opinion is this: sports is something that you play with fellow beings to create an atmosphere, to create to celebrate the spirit of sports, right? For example, when you play for the country, as Santosh has pointed out, you are being larger than yourself, you are playing for something bigger than yourself, and you are playing for that ideal. But I think personally IPL can be totally called as entertainment, because here, though even if it appears like a sport, the essence, the very core essence has moved away from the spirit, and it's more about, marketing, making money, tickets sold, yes, attraction and hangama. So here, I'm just coming for the success, but uh, what happens because of the success and all those things, like do I get points, can I sell more things? There is a lot of hangama, right? Okay, that is where marketing has totally taken away the essence. And even if there is a betting, etc etc within these things, okay, I don't think people will be offended. But when it comes to the nation level, I think it makes a huge amount of difference. Again, this is my personal opinion. There is no definition. So I personally will believe IPL is a entertainment, whereas sports, as even a gully cricket is a sport if you are playing it for the sake of the game itself. Okay, right. So again, the discussion is not about IPL. The discussion is about the basics, the value addition part, and the current affairs part. Value addition is a very subjective term. Everybody have their own definition. The most paranoid will read a lot, like cover maximum depth. That is one thing. Current affairs is thought process. Your thought process is your greatest asset, because the longer you read, the regularly you think on ethics, the easier it will become for your answer writing. Clear? Okay. And yeah, and one more thing is public administration or GS paper to have a lot of influence on the ethics papers. So most people will be referring to the thinkers from PubAd. That is not a crime, but remember, essence have to be Indian, because we are discussing about India. Okay, and at the same time, second ARC report have a huge impact on the last four topics, public services and all those things onwards in the syllabus copy. Second ARC have a lot of influence, because there is lack of any other material, lack of alternatives. But fortunately for us, UPSC is not asking what is work culture. It has not done that. It has used work culture in ethics case studies, but we have to see it on a everyday basis. Now, and lastly, most books or most textbooks which are already in the market don't touch upon Indian ethos or terms. That is something you have to start incorporating at the earliest. Okay, for example, whenever you write about categorical imperative or can't, also try to bring in Bhagavad Gita. There is no crime, and examiner will feel something unique. Okay, just like the same thing, whenever you talk about work culture, you also bring Bhagavad Gita. See, that is actually done in the intro parts of ARC reports. If you read the first chapters of ARC report, the introductions, sometimes they bring in this ethics, Vedas, Upanishads, and all those things. But that translation or bringing Indian ethos and Indian terms into the syllabus copies has been minimal. I think Vishaka Yadav or someone, 2020, 2021, she got 160 plus in ethics. I have seen her answer copies. She actually tried to do this in a very decent way. Not in a total way, but I think she has introduced that. So if you can take it to the next level, you can also be assured that you can get a 10 marks or 15 marks buffer in comparison to your peers. So karmanya vadikarasya ma phaleshu kadachana. So it tells that, you know, you have to do the work for the sake of the work, right? And that Indian value system is always there. So work culture is not some Western concept. We have it from ages, dharma. So dharma rakshat rakshitah. So if you uphold the dharma, dharma will protect you. So what is your dharma? Your dharma as a bureaucrat is to uphold your job no matter what. All right. So such kind of interlinkage or usage has to increase consciously. So I am sure you have read work culture in the DK Balaji book. Yes, it's a very straightforward concept, but still we will try to, we have seen it yesterday in the case studies, and we understood how difficult it is for a honest bureaucrat to do some job in the system, because the system is so deeply set that it doesn't allow the new changes and innovations, right? Now, why Indian administrative setup is so difficult or so unique? What are the reasons why Indian administrative setup is like this? Or what are the factors that has determined the Indian culture? What are the factors or what are the determinants of Indian work culture, especially in the government setup? What are the reasons or determinants of Indian work culture? So again, yesterday I told you, right, like why Indian government setup is like this. So why do you think, you remember the case study where the IAS officer was appointed to a department, he wants to change it, but sexual harassment case was filed against it. So that is just one example. Family values of respecting the elders' loyalties, rarely bosses are opposed. Okay. So even after becoming an IAS, do you think that same value system will be driving you? Very good point. This is the single biggest influence. Hierarchical roles and responsibilities. Very good point, Chakri. So the first and biggest influence is colonial legacy. So we are used to a set system where, see, the colonial rulers set the rules for what? For exploitation. family values, social values, organizational leadership, political leadership, and colonial hangover. Very good. So almost all the points are true. All of you have suggested. Even what Sharath you told is applicable, but it in a different setting. I will tell you how. The essence is correct. For example, colonial legacy. Colonial rules were exploitative. They were oppressive, right? They also were secretive. Like they wanted to keep the knowledge away from the people. So all these three things actually flow into the present day governance, right? Even now the bureaucrat is not happy giving up the information, right? Official Secrets Act is existing. So second DRC report suggested to remove and repeal such act. So he is not welfare oriented. So all these hangovers are subconsciously flowing into the system. And one more thing is the colonial hangover also brought in rigid hierarchies. If X1 is the boss, X2, X3, X4, no matter what, this chain of command has to be maintained, and that breeds the MyBop culture. Like the superior officer know what is best. Okay, even X4 believes that the superior is doing a wrong, but still the system creates such ecosystem that X1 is correct all the time. The elder of the family is correct. So in that way, the social influence and the colonial hangover come together and create this toxic culture. Because X4, let's say, is an SI who actually deals with the ground level. He knows the ground realities. But X1 is let's say, an IPS officer or a DJ sitting in some AC room, very deeply disconnected from the changing systems. Right? I'm not saying it breeds inefficiency. There are very smart people. Just as an example, I'm telling you that colonial legacy had created this rigid hierarchical culture, which discourages any kind of mobility. Right? And there is no incentive. For example, if an SI performs very well, it's very hard for him to become, a SP cadre officer or something like that. Even in ASP, he has to put in certain number of years, X number of years, automatically you will be promoted. Lack of competition is also one reason for the work culture in the government. Definitely, monopoly type of cultures have been created. And again, fixed promotions. One of the important reasons is fixed promotion, right? SI, if you work as an SI for 5 years, automatically you will be promoted. Then 5 years, then you will be promoted. So whether you do your work or not, whether you do your work extraordinary or not, it doesn't matter. Very often, the promotions are given on purely merit based, right? So the rigidities, all this stem from one thing, that is our colonial legacy. Okay. So what does colonial legacy breed? It creates a problem of rigid mindsets. There is fixed promotions. Okay. Secrecy. Can we also say we have become too comfortable with these systems and want to deal with a known devil but trying to change? That is exactly the problem, right, Yashashwini? To change the system, you have to change multiple levels. One is the structural level. The other one is behavioral level, right? Procedural levels. See, structures have to be changed. Behaviors have to be changed. And procedures have to be changed. And all these things will take a lot of time, money, effort, and training. When system is already overburdened, I cannot take away certain number of people and start training. For example, I will tell you a simple thing. Whistleblower culture. Okay, so if you take the Dera Baba case, or any number of cases, right? If someone files an FIR against you, X went and filed an FIR against Y. Okay, the next thing the police station will do is inform Y, like who actually is complaining against you. The social cultures actually spill over into the Y. So unlike in the Western movies or in the TV series where they show, whistleblower culture, they will change the identity, they will give you new identity, will protect your identity at all costs. I don't think that will actually work in India, because we don't have that culture of privacy, that culture of providing importance to the organization rather than the social connections. For me, to be in the good books of why is more important as a person rather than what my own department thinks about me. That is a behavioral change that has to come, and that should be changed. Yes. If you don't understand that example, a simple example will be a traffic constable has stopped you when you are in a civil dress. Okay, you are an IPS officer, you are not on duty, you went to a different town, you are driving a car, you are not carrying your license. Okay, a traffic constable has stopped you. Okay, so legally speaking or normally speaking, you are supposed to pay the fine, right? What will happen in India? You are not even an officer from the same state. The officer can test the work culture of the police in that region. Okay, but normally what happens is you say that I am so and so, or if you are carrying that ID card, you will show. That police constable will salute you and he will ask you, sir, should I get a coffee for you? Okay, that means in the mind of that constable, IPS is someone above the cloud. Okay, he's a god walking. So that behavior cannot be taken away from him. In his mind, an officer is an officer no matter what he does. Okay, he's still something higher. That hierarchical system has been breeded so deeply into our system that even if an officer is committing a crime or breaking the law in some other state in a personal capacity, still he is treated above the system, right? That something has to change, and that is not something very easy, right? I think a Hyderabad mayor or someone, she gave a plastic wrapped gift and the next day she went and paid the fine or something like that. So that there are rare cases where such things happen. So I'm trying to give you an example like how the structural changes have to happen, the behavioral changes and the procedural changes come together to change the systems, and these types of things don't happen very easily, right? See, reading theory is one thing, but you also have to be pragmatic, right? And again, in that case, the problem is with the IPS, not with the constable. Knowing all the rules and regulations and what you have done, you should have that honesty and integrity and the value system to promote a positive work culture, because he is doing his duty. He stopped you and he asked you for the license, so he is correct in his senses. So it's you who is misusing the system, right? And just for idea sake, we can bring in the mission Karma Yogi and all those things, right? Recently the Thai PM was fined for not wearing mask in the public. Yes, such examples have to be yes, that is, yeah, technically you're reinforcing the work culture. Yes, you can say that. See, normally speaking, this is the funding pattern for the police departments. The top 10 percentage, the personal funding and personal patterns. So only 10% of personnel belongs to IPS and other cadres, higher cadres, ASP, SP, and all those things. 90% are constables, home guards, and SIs, right? But the funding pattern is reverse. Majority of the money is spent on these people's training, but not here. Right? So that is also one colonial legacy that we are carrying. The hierarchies are very, very important, and we need to invest a lot in promoting them. So only when you fund the lowest constable or a home guard and empower them, then the work cultures will change. Yes. During COVID wave 1, if you remember, there is a lady constable in Delhi where she stopped the minister's son and she scolded them, and it has become a media sensation. Right? Even when the minister called her on the spot, she was like, your son is not wearing the mask. What will I do? Rules are rules. Right? So then I think she resigned or something. I don't know. I don't remember. I think she resigned or she was forced to resign or something like that. So I will find that news and share with you, so you can understand what is work culture at ground level and what is work culture in theory. Okay. So this is all related to the colonial hangovers. Next is what we call as, yeah, I think Surat or somewhere. We still have very old laws and regulations, right? The colonial hangover again. This also flows from the colonial legacy, the archaic law system that led to a lot of problems. I told you an example. Within the IAS officers, there was a discussion which color pen should be used, who should be done what, who should be doing what. So there are these colonial laws and regulations which does not convert the system into a very empathetic system, but thanks to present government, it has repealed thousands of laws. The present government literally has removed thousands of useless laws from all over the country. Hundreds of laws have been identified, and they were all made into one list, and all of them were collectively repealed. Right? So such progressive things are being done. So that will also change the work culture. Next, the most important thing that is this is also not technically colonial hangover, but this is something brown sahab. The white sahab has been replaced with the brown sahab, right? We have become our own masters after 1947, and from that point onwards, there is a lot of change in our own work culture. So as all of you know the story, ICS was converted into IAS thanks to the intervention of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and IAS has continued. So he understood IAS is a very important tool for nation building. It is the steel frame of the country, right? That steel frame will protect the country from the governance failure. This is what he has thought. But none of those founders of the nation actually dreamt that we will keep hampering ourselves because of excessive political interventions. And even today, that is the single biggest problem in the nation and nation development: political intervention. I won't let you do your work, and I want you to do my own work, right? So vested interest has a big problem. If you see, any organization nowadays has been politicized, right? Either directly or indirectly. At the ground level, we don't even know how much influence these people have. For example, normal police cases like SI and CI level, the sheer influence of the political masters is huge. The other day I told you, right? The appointment of DGP. if itself is a politicized, then we don't even have a hope for the lower cadres, right? The best case study in the recent times I can think of is the DGP of Andhra Pradesh, right? I think he is the only DGP who have been summoned by the High Court so many times, and that shows, that reeks that political intervention is not refused or stopped by the bureaucracy. See, politicians by sheer nature, they will always go for their maximization, vote maximization, or party welfare, and sometimes it will spill over into the governance also. So it is the responsibility of the bureaucrat to act as a shield to refuse the advances of the politicians or political masters. So when you succumb, when you give in to that particular thing, then there is no need to discuss all these things, right? There is no ethics paper, there is no administrative reforms. All these things are totally waste of time, right? So political intervention is a severe problem, and the biggest thing is it leads to a culture of corruption and nepotism. The moment when a political intervention is there, I will get you transferred, I will get you promoted. Then why do I have to do my work? I will do his work. I will do things to his focus. See, I will be crystal clear. Whatever we are discussing, let's say 70% good people are there, and 70% work is being done for a normal person also. Okay, but the 30%, this gray area is what we are discussing about. So don't assume the entire systems, all the officers, all the CISIs are corrupt and all those things. That is not my intention. What I'm trying to tell you is, if this is the entire system except this block, okay, the rest is very good. Okay, so let's say 90% is good, but this 10% is a cancer. This 10% is what becomes examples. This 10% is what is targeted, and this 10% is danger zone, because we don't know when this will spill over into this. Think about it. For example, government has given 800 crore rupees for oxygen plant or something. Okay, before this I never bothered about oxygen, whether India had oxygen tankers or not, oxygen plants or not, and all those things. But when there was a stress test on the entire system, because of these 10% corrupt people, the rest of the 90% are suffering, right? And this 10% made good amount of money, they have privilege, they can afford everything, and they will be safe, but the 90% are suffering, right? So if there are 10 thefts in a police department, okay, there is one, and the rest of the 9 cases are pending, but an MLA will call and say some amount of gold has been stolen from my brother-in-law's house or something. If you focus on this particular person, there is no crime, there is no harm, right? But tomorrow if he says, manipulate a case of murder or something, then definitely that will have a ramification on the rest of the society. So where do we draw that line? Yes. So political intervention is a very dangerous thing, and it leads to corruption and nepotism. When nepotism is introduced, the morale of the honest officers will come down. Honest officer does not have an incentive to be honest, because no matter how hard he tries, okay, you're not going to be promoted, or you're not going to get any benefit. Next. Indian, these are all Indian setups, Indian influence. This is the single biggest influence. caste, religion, cultural settings. So all these things will also have a huge influence on your work culture, right? Let's say, again, we'll take a small town example where an SI belongs to a particular community. A crime has been committed by an upper caste. The SI also belongs to the same upper caste. Then there is a lower or so-called lower caste people, right? A crime has been committed by X on LC. Then SI will be forced to, dilute the case, and there will be a lot of pressure. This is what we have seen in Hathras in Uttar Pradesh. Right? When you belong to the same caste from the same person, okay, there will be a lot of pressure on you, and all the power in the world cannot shield you from that kind of influence. We have seen this, right? In your own preparation time. All the upper caste men of that particular village coming and started blaming. So yeah, probably I was at the Hathras rape case, right? Like where the societal influence will be heavy on the system. Yes, and this is something we have seen in our own lifetime, and that is something very bad. So how do you empower the bureaucrat is by establishing mechanisms. This is what we call as procedural or systemic mechanisms. It's a good and a bad thing. I won't call it as totally a bad thing, because sometimes this particular person will have a lot of goodwill in the society or good morale on the influence of the entire society. He can dial down the communal violence, or he can dial down the violence or atrocities. Being an educated person, he will have like a good amount of influence on the society. So it's a two-way street. Sometimes he will persuade the others, most of the times they will persuade him. But that is unfortunately or fortunately the established system of the society, right? So please remember that is again one very influential thing in India. Right? And one more important point you have to remember is the randomness. For example, you are a very honest officer. Let's say you are working in CBI. You have collected all the evidence against, let's say, politician one, and then overnight again you will receive an order saying, put the case on hold. And that leads to, see, till this point you worked fantastically. The system gave you so much support. You collected all the evidence. You had an extraordinary job. You thought like it's a done deal, almost the case is over. And when does the sense of satisfaction come into the picture? The sense of satisfaction will come into the picture when you actually take it to the logical conclusion, right? But the case is pending from last 10 years. So next time, what morale or what motivation do you have to continue the same? Right? You will think, let's say you are innocent. You tried it for the second time. Again, they ask you to do the same thing. Then third time, you won't do all these things, right? You will definitely be demotivated, and that will affect the work culture. And not only that, you will tell the young generation who are coming as subordinates, like, don't be so superhero, because at the end of the day, it will all be random. When if they want to punish P1, right? Suddenly they will ask you, where is the case? Right? The Maharashtra Home Minister is a best example. Right? Sanjay Raut is one more example, I think. Yes. So all these things are random, arbitrary. And that will definitely spoil the system. So what is the outcome of this randomness? Again, corruption and nepotism. If an officer is listening to you, let's say he put the case on hold, or if he has done something favorable to you, you will keep promoting him, then others will be demotivated. So a honest officer won't have any motivation to be honest, right? So in the same way, I have added like few things. Uh, uh, even if you read the standard textbook, the same points, but it's very easy to understand points. When you have excessive centralization and authoritarian leadership, that will lead to a negative work culture. So all these are negative work culture areas: excessive centralization and authoritarian leadership. When you don't delegate, things won't get done, and that will lead to a lot of problems. Bound by rules and regulations. A bureaucrat is always supposed to play within the rules and regulations, and sometimes you feel helplessness, right? You cannot do anything innovative or creative, even there is a way, but because you are bound by rules and regulations, right? When individual interest prevails over organizational interest, that leads to conflict of interest, and that also leads to a negative work culture. Let's say XYZ are three officers. If X and Z sorry, if X and Z are prioritizing their work culture or their personal choices over the organization choices, that will definitely impact the Y, right? So in the same way, you can understand, right? So what promotes positive work cultures, values and ethics in the organization? Positive attitude, efficiency, effectiveness. So self-explanatory, but the important point being how the Indian setting is one major factor, and how are you going to see it on a daily basis and bring it to the answer writing? This is what separates you from the crowd. Please never ever forget that one single word. Okay. Now I will definitely make sure that I will give you the examples. Whenever I see an example, I will keep sharing them with you. But the thing is, when you read newspapers, are you also seeing them or not is more important. Fortunately for us, not a single question has come till now directly on part A of work culture. There is no question in part A of work culture. But when you see part B, the case studies part, subly, underlyingly, work culture has been asked multiple times. Even if they haven't asked in any of the case study in relation to government setting, you can bring in this work culture. And work culture is a macro topic which consists of all the subtopics like citizen charter, uh, RTI Act, transparency, accountability, efficiency and effectiveness, utilization of public funds. So all these terms come automatically under the work culture. I hope all of you understood what work culture is doing to the nation's growth and how each and everything is interlinked. Any direct or any specific doubts on work culture? See, you can also bring in examples like the present Prime Minister and Indira Gandhi. Both of them have excessive centralized working cultures. Everything is centralized at PMO. PMO is very powerful. Whereas during the Manmohan Singh government, the cabinet was very powerful. So work cultures in the nation itself will change depending on the leadership also. Yadha Raja Tata Praja. So if the leader is honest, automatically the lower cadres will tend to be honest. If the leader is corrupt, then automatically everybody will have their own say in the system. How can we say there is centralization when government is focusing on minimum government, maximum governance? It's a good question. So, I mean, I don't even know how to, where to begin actually. So it's very difficult question for me to like where to start. Like, how do we say it's a centralized? Let's say we will start with all the decisions taken by the government flows from the top order, right? There is no clear discussion or deliberation, whether it's Aadhaar bill or demonetization. So you can take anything. There is see, power centralization means what? It's a decision taking ability, right? The decision taking ability is rooted in few people, and that automatically flows through the system. For example, recently the Delhi bill, the National Capital Territory bill, right? Why is it not centralizing? The imposition of lockdowns, or the decision to give vaccines or sell vaccines to the state, or throw states under the bus, that you have to acquire your own vaccines. So aren't these all centralized decisions? Is there a consensus? At least I am not aware of it. So it's very safe to say the present government is excessively centralized, and the power center is very, very narrow, right? So don't assume the governance is one thing and it's all about the decision taking ability. And the real concept is maximum governance. So the opposite is equally true. So governance is also not sure, because nobody knows like what exactly is happening, right? I mean, again, it's not, ethics paper is not the place to discuss the flaws of the centralistic tendencies, but you get the basic idea, right? I haven't seen the minimum government, maximum governance concept except in privatizations. Yes. Yes. Any other questions? You will go through your own understanding, and one day you will realize all these things. I don't have to explain the basic details, right? So whatever your personal ideologies or my personal ideologies are, at the end of the day, when we both stand on empirical data, we can more than amply prove whether there is a minimum government or maximum government, or minimum government and maximum governance. As Manmohan Singh said once, history will be the judge of that, right? Unfortunately for him, history will never be kind against him. Yes, any other question basically on work culture? So please read D.K. Balaji, the specific chapter, probity in governance once again. Yes. If you have any questions on the specific chapter, chapter number 6 in D.K. Balaji, right? It's around 60 pages, very easy to read. If you haven't read that, please do read it. And if you find any questions, or if you think we need to elaborate on any one particular topic, drop a message on Telegram. Okay. Any other questions, Santosh, Sharath? Manogna? Chakri? Yes, please read the chapter again. If you have any questions from that particular chapter, then please let me know on Telegram. I will be more than happy to provide you the value addition material also. As I told you, it's not a one-day event, right? It's not like a one-time event. It's a journey. It's a continuous journey. We have to keep seeing everyday current affairs, and we have to keep adding value, right? So read the entire 6th unit again, probity in governance, once again, and let me know. If you have any questions, drop a message on Telegram. And now whatever is remaining is value addition part. As I told you, John Rawls, some part of corruption, whistleblower bill, public service delivery bill, and citizen charters. So all these are value addition parts. So we will discuss with the value additions. Okay. So if you find any examples in the newspapers, or if you think something is a ethics worthy example, do share it with me. We will discuss whether it's a ethics worthy example or not, or share it in the groups, right? So everybody will come to know about it. That will also help improve our appetite towards ethics paper. Okay. Yes. So see you all tomorrow, same time. Hope all of you are safe and reading well. Yes, everything is fine. I will definitely respond today. So please stay in lockdown mode. Things are very bad out, on the public level. People are still messaging for remdesivir, etc., etc. Things are very, very bad, and we hear, some or the other news on a daily basis. So please don't do any adventures. Stay home and tell your parents also not to do any adventures. Yes, and take care of your health, especially the mental health. I know some of you are already feeling the derailment of your preparation. I can sense that, right? So don't let your mental health be affected by all that is happening outside you, right? So stay strong. If you feel like talking to someone, I'm always available. Just drop a message. Yes. Right. Okay then. See you all tomorrow. Stay safe.